All right, we are now joined by a very special guest. He is songwriter, singer, guitarist, performer, MYCHAEL Gabriel. How are you, Michael?
I'm doing great, Jay. How about yourself?
Oh, doing so good. Now that you're in the house, we're talking the album Genesis. We're
Yes.
talking a single Sunday afternoon. So much to be excited about. We've talked before in another segment about how you kind of came into this business crawling in the crib, you know.
Yeah.
Mom was, collaborating, growing up with Sheila E., and who you're now very, very a part of, and Pops was in there working security for Prince on that breakout, Purple Rain tour. Of course, being involved, like I say, in the industry, I was in there early promoting and seeing him on tour with Rick James and
Yep.
coming up and doing
You
these
were right there in
festivals.
the mix as
Oh
well.
yeah, I mean, by the time I was in the room when the great Bernie Grundman mastered the Dirty Mind album, and
Wow.
and then
That had to
seeing
be
what
something.
oh yeah, and then seeing what he did with Controversy, and then 1999, and now it's getting on MTV, and you're like,
I
who is
bet,
this
see,
guy?
I bet you have some stories.
I definitely have stories, and I want to continue these stories as much as I can. I call it archiving greatness, because you never know when the shifts of time and life, change. And I really love and have a passion for helping people tell their story
Yeah.
and inspiring others from it. It's one thing to talk about, yeah, I got this new product out, go buy this. But it's another thing to talk about the story behind. How did it all come together?
Right. Yeah.
What's the journey like? And, seeing your father evolve from security into management and running Paisley Park up there, and can't wait to come take a tour, and just seeing,
Right.
everything that's transpired. And of course, Sheila E., being from the Bay, that famous Escovedo family,
Yep.
Pops and everybody is playing the percussion. Everybody's out there doing things. And then, her gravitating to LA, obviously recording down here, and so much of the industry is based here in film and TV and music. And then, seeing you kind of gravitate like second generation. Tell us again how you made that move, and knowing what you knew about recording and playing, that knocked on Sheila's door and say, "Hey, I think I can help you."
Right. Yeah. No, it's a pretty crazy one. So music has always been a force in my life and in my household, growing up, especially. And I had a passion for songwriting early on. And I started as a young teen with an 8-track tape recorder. And I just kind of was frustrated one day. And I said, why aren't my recordings sounding on par with some of these records that I love? Like, I had no context. Like, as a really young teen, I had no context for, studio recording or engineering or anything, like that. So more out of frustration than anything, I was like, okay, well, like, what am I doing wrong? Then I start to get inspired. Then I go to school for audio. And I learned that it's way more involved than I thought. It's not as simple as like just hitting the red button. And so, when I finished audio school, I gave Sheila a call and I said, hey, I think I want to do this thing in music, performance, recording, something, all of it, anything. If I flew out to LA, would you have me? Could I just be a fly on the wall in the studio, try to get some real world experience? And she was so gracious, and she kind of took me under her wing. And next thing I know, I'm out in LA emptying garbage cans, transferring DAT tapes. And fast forward a couple weeks, couple months, her head engineer ends up leaving to go out on tour. And then she looks to me and she says, hey, I need somebody to fill in this position. Like, I'm looking for a head engineer. You said you went to audio school. Do you know how to run any of this equipment? Either being, young and naive, or just really excited, about having an opportunity, I jumped at the chance. And that turned into a whole career for me. It turned into me not only working with Sheila, but working with other artists, working in film and television. And fast forward to today, I've been Sheila E.'s lead guitarist for nearly a decade.
Yeah, no, it's you want to say yes, even though in the back of your mind you're like, I may not know everything here,
Right.
but I'm going to start cramming,
I'm
at
gonna
night.
start cramming. I'm gonna
I
figure it out,
I'll
and
I'll
work.
ask a lot of questions, and before you
Yeah.
know it, I will know how to operate this.
Right. I always say, some of the smartest people in the world are the ones that ask the most questions. And so, don't shy away from asking questions, but also don't shy away from just, you know, believing in yourself, or that you have enough confidence to give it your best shot. You might not know everything. You're going to make some mistakes. And, you know, realizing and recognizing that we learn more from our mistakes and our failures than we do the things we're successful at, you know. And so that learning experience it's vital, especially to having any sort of career in this industry.
Yeah, no, it's so important. Having that passion
Right.
for it is more than half the equation. Just
Oh, for
filling
sure.
in the gaps, and of course now we got YouTube. You can start,
Oh,
searching,
yes.
and there's tutorials and
Man, what
Google
I
and
would have done to have had like a YouTube when I first started learning, like, let's just say guitar. I'm sitting there with, like a Joe Satriani, CD at the time, but I started like listening to cassettes and vinyls and whatnot. But I remember, I'm like, man, how is he doing this? And, nowadays you can, look up concert footage, there's tutorials, you can sit down with Satch himself, via YouTube and slow it down frame by frame, and he'll tell you everything you want to know. I'm like, man, what a day and age we live in.
well, yeah, being that promotion guy for the last 50 years, when I tell the youngsters who are trying to come up in the business that we broke a lot of their favorite artists, a lot of the icons that they know, with no computers, no cell phones, no
Right.
internet, no social media. They're like, what?
How? What?
How?
How did you even survive?
What's the first step? If I don't turn on my phone, I can't even get out of bed.
Wait, you guys didn't have phones? You didn't have cell phones?
Literally a house phone, a landline, and a computer was something like IBM would have or something,
Right. Yep. Yep.
these big mainframes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, technology is a blessing and a curse. Just like I say, the internet, it's the
Sure.
best thing and the worst thing that
Yeah.
ever happened.
It's so
I
true.
I remember coming up, there'd be like 50 albums a month total in the industry. Six
Right.
from Warner Brothers and 4 from MCA and 3 from Arista and
Right.
5 from Atlantic, and you had the whole industry up, and there's maybe 50. Now
Right.
there's like 50,000 an hour going
Oh,
up on Spotify.
I know. It's crazy. It's crazy.
But that brings us to Genesis. Tell us about your coming into this. What your thoughts were.
Right.
What your vision was, what you want to create. Because I know you play in multiple genres.
Yeah. So Genesis came about during the pandemic. I think, like a lot of other people, I started kind of reevaluating, where I was in my career, what I wanted to do in my life. I knew I'd always wanted to release an album, but for me, it was more than just putting 12 tracks on a record and saying, okay, here's my album. It was important for me to have a concept and be able to tell a story. But that didn't fully materialize start to materialize until, the beginning of 2022. And I just made the decision. I said, you've been doing this a lot for other people, for other artists, kind of propping them up and playing that sort of support role. What if you kind of took the time and energy to do this for real for yourself? And so at the beginning of 2022, I started working on the album Genesis. And so it's part biblical allegory in terms of concept and story, but it also speaks to just the human experience in general, and also my personal journey. It's a retelling of my personal journey by way of songs, by way of sounds that have inspired me to become the artist that I am today. So by design, it's a multi-genre record.
Well, I love that. I always say there's two kinds of music: music that moves you and music that doesn't. Forget the categories, the genres, the
Right.
subcategories. I mean, critics come up with those names,
Right.
nobody
Yeah.
playing music said this is, that. It's some journalist that comes up with these silly
Sure.
titles, and I always love the hybrids, the people that are trying to blur the lines between rock and soul, or
Right.
pop and
Well,
hip hop, or funk and jazz.
sure, sure. Well, for me, the way that I think when I'm writing a song, I don't think in terms of genre. Genre is just another tool that I would use for artistic expression to kind of relay the feeling or vibe that I'm trying to represent. Like, a guitar riff, or, a drum beat, or, something on the piano or bass line, and some genres kind of lean more towards a certain feeling or more emotion than others. And so that's kind of how I think about it. I think first in terms of, feeling, what is that I want to feel, and what is it that I want the audience to feel. And so, there was no other way for me to tell the story, for me to create this album without it being based upon feeling. I wanted it to feel kind of like a roller coaster. I wanted to feel like, from start to finish, by the time you get to the end, you feel like you went somewhere.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, it's just like a good movie, it's escapism. It takes you out of your everyday life. And
Right.
I know a great album is like that too. It's a journey. Every song doesn't sound the same. Um, there's twists and turns, hills and valleys, and by the end of it, you feel, wow, that was an amazing journey. I feel like
Yeah.
taking that trip again sometime.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's the idea anyway.
Now, obviously, we talked about these self-contained artists and all these, people in a room with 12 different instruments. Who did you bring in, to complete your vision? Obviously, you play a lot of the instruments, but
Sure.
who helped you fulfill your vision for this?
So I had some sounding boards. One of them being my father. I probably, play him. He's probably the first to hear everything that I do. And some close friends and family and whatnot. But it's I played everything extremely close to the chest on this one. So much so that everything that you hear from beginning to end, all the vocals, all the instrumentation, all of the lyrics, all of the recording, the mixing, it's all me. And that was also by design, because I wanted this idea for this record to be fully and completely, because it's an introduction to, almost to most everybody, to me as an artist. So it was important for me to say, okay, this is kind of the full version of who I am, and all of the skills and talents and different things that I've acquired throughout my journey. I'm kind of putting it on display, and that's the Genesis album.
Yeah, that is a statement for sure. Now, tell us about the song Sunday Afternoon, what that means to you, and why you feel that's a good, face forward for the album.
Sure. Yeah. So it's the third single on this album. We started off with Celebrate, which is, Minneapolis funk kind of all the way. And then Let There Be Light is the second single, which is inspired by like 1970s rock and roll. Sunday Afternoon is kind of like our melancholy love song, I guess you would call it. I started off writing this song just sitting at my piano in my living room. And I said, okay, it would be kind of fun to like start off this first verse with like just the sappiest lyrics that you could think of. And one of the lines goes something like, I've never heard someone say hello as beautiful as you say hello, and that's just, I'm so captivated by it. That's kind of the idea of the first verse. but anybody that's been in a relationship knows that it's not all roses and sunshine, all the way through. There's trials and tribulations. We all go through storms from time to time. And so, I said, what if I turned it completely on its head in the second verse and talk about only things that are like everything's going wrong. Everything that could go wrong has gone wrong, and we're in a bad place. And so that's the second verse. And as the song progresses, I started thinking a lot about humanity and just the human experience. And I said, okay, what is the human experience, if we don't have hope? So by the end of the song, it doesn't end with a period. It ends with a question mark. And you find yourself sort of at, there's a Y in the road, so to speak, by the time you get to the end. And so it's just kind of a big question mark as to what happens, because there's in the word life, in the middle of the word life, there's the word if. And so it's kind of up to us what we decide to do with that. And so that's kind of what the song sort of represents in a nutshell. A melancholy love song called Sunday Afternoon.
Yeah, well, we love a good Sunday afternoon. It's brings back so many memories. And talk about memories. You mentioned a kind of an ode to 70s rock. And before MTV kind of came in and there was so much focus on what you look like, and the label started like telling the artists, well, you got to look more like this band, and
Right.
you got to
Yeah.
look or sound more like these guys.
Right.
What the 70s were just so, unbridled. It was so
It
unique. Every
was.
artist
Yeah.
sounded different. And it came out of the 60s. The 60s was kind of the revolution.
Yep.
And then Led Zeppelin kind of came out in 69, or, just launched the 70s. But
Right.
I always say the 70s is like the blueprint for everything that has come since.
Right.
You're drawing upon something from those incredible 70s artists or genres. What do you think it was about the 70s that made it such a incredible decade for music?
So it was the rawness, I feel like. The rawness. And because we live in a day and age where now, not taken away from any other current artists, but we live in a day and age where, everything has to be so perfect. Like every drum beat has to be quantized, every vocal has to be auto-tuned, and every minor imperfection has to be ironed out. And the 70s was not that. It found the perfection in the imperfection. And I feel like there's certain times where it's like you don't feel like you're listening to the guitar. You feel like you're listening to the band's soul, and there's something just magical about that. There's something magical about the rawness, because it speaks to, our own humanity. And I feel like, whether we realize it or not, we're attracted to that. We're attracted to, the retelling of, the human experience through multiple perspectives. And the 70s was a particularly great era, in which, it almost seemed to do that with ease, and so I love music from that era. And so there's a track on the album in particularly that's that kind of pays homage to that era, and that's Let There Be Light.
Yeah. No, I mean, just in the Bay Area alone, as we've spoken, you have all these incredible different styles and sounds. Like I say, from the
Yep.
Latin styles of Santana to the progressive rock of Journey, which became more mainstream, to all those, Tower of Power and the
Oh
jazz
man.
artists
Whew.
and the funk artists,
Yep.
coming out of there. And, it was a hotbed, the parliaments and everybody would be coming
Right.
through and um, jamming. And of course, Sly and the
Yeah.
Family Stone, and so much. That's just one city in the
Yeah.
70s had such a microcosm of innovative
Yeah.
sounds and people blending,
Yeah.
genres.
And
Forget about all these other great cities. It was
sure.
it seemed like the record labels pretty much once you sign an artist, you let them do what they did best.
Right.
And
Right.
especially Warner. I always say Warner was such a perfect label for Prince because he gave him time to develop. Sure, he had, some little breakthrough hits in the R&B charts and stuff on the first or second record, but to him, he was like, no, I want to rock.
Right.
I
Yeah.
want to funk. I want to do all this other stuff. And they just let him do what he did. And then when he came to him after 1999, said, I want to make my own movie.
Right.
If you didn't have a company that made movies and understood the audio visual aspects, they would have been like, hey, dude, just get back in the studio. It's like, it was incredible to see that growth. And of course, they had Fleetwood Mac and so many other artists that evolved over the years. But and then they had artists like Van Halen and Madonna that hit on their first record and didn't need that time to grow. But you already sensed that Mo Austin and the crew over there would have given them that space if they needed it.
Right.
Like a
Sure.
Little Feat or something. It's like, you guys may not be, on the top of the charts or these big commercial sellers, but we signed you. We believed in you,
Right.
Maybe we'll pace our promotional budgets and stuff accordingly, but we're going to let you grow. And it, like I say, by the time, the 80s, things got more corporate and MTV and all this, BET. And then it got to the point where rather than give Prince 4 or 5 albums to break, you got like a single and like 4 or 5 months to break, or you're
Right.
off the
Yeah.
label. It was
Yeah.
such a change.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. For sure. Another thing I will add, about um that era in particular is bands played together. And now in the modern age of multi-track recording, a lot of times you have people just sending files, back and forth and whatnot. And so, when you have musicians kind of in the same room having a conversation together, like it's a lot different than if, yeah, I mean, you can have a conversation of sorts, virtually by sending files back and forth. Like, I do that all the time. I'm not knocking that process, but it is entirely different when you have musicians in the same room having an active like conversation in real time, because it becomes a living organism then. And so there was a lot of that happening in the 70s era for sure.
Yeah, no, there's nothing like playing live and then transferring that to the studio where, of course you got to create the separation to have multi-track mixing, but you still want to have that vibe. Like, hey,
Yeah.
I'm in the same room,
Yeah. Right.
I want to be able to look over, when I'm playing my bass and see you playing the drums and lock
Yeah.
into that groove.
Oh yeah, it's still and it's musicians having a conversation. So there's gonna be like, somebody might go kind of a little bit off the rails, might go a little left. This person might swear over here on their instrument, and this person might respond accordingly. And there's just all sorts of tiny, micro interactions that can make a world of difference in a track that you're not necessarily gonna get, at least not organically, by sending files back and forth in kind of the modern sense.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. And you've obviously worn a lot of hats, which I always say is very, very important. Like I say, I started as a musician, and then I realized that I could take this creative knowledge, this creative passion I have, and bring it over to the business side and be that creative businessman to help represent the artist. Because I always felt that, sometimes something's lost in translation. It's like the business people look at the musicians as being these kind of weirdo creative types, and the musicians are like, oh, those guys in the suits, we can't trust any of them. And it's like, whoa, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Without a without a bridge,
Yeah.
something's gonna get lost. A great
Right.
artist
Right.
might not get through or get dropped before they have a chance to shine. So
Yeah. Because it takes all different shapes and sizes and types and people with different skills and talents. Like it takes all of us together to make it happen. You can't just have the creatives either. You can't just have the suits. You got to have the bridges, so that we can all come together and make it happen. We're all on the same team.
Yeah. So understanding the studio, the recording process, coming up in the industry, learning what you've had, being around, pops and your mom, and then what you learned from Sheila and all that just prepares you more as an artist of what you want to
Absolutely.
say and how you can say it, and all of that. Now, tell us your plans to take this out and perform. I know the live arena has changed in the business, and we have these streaming shows and virtual this and that. But what is your hope to be able to take this music to the people?
Well, so I mean, it wouldn't be complete, the whole process, writing, creating this record, putting it out there. It wouldn't be complete without, the live performance aspect, because, that's where I get a lot of my enjoyment out of this. I'm preparing to go on a tour with Sheila, actually, starting from mid-January, all the way up into March. And it was funny when, during the pandemic, all of this shut down. I was touring heavily, you know, um, prior to 2020. And then when everything shut down, it's like everybody was in denial, especially us musicians. We were like, oh, we'll be down for, a couple weeks. Okay, maybe a couple months. Okay, well, summer's totally shot, but that's okay. We'll be back in the fall. Okay, fall's gone too, but, maybe we'll have a couple things in the winter. But you know what? 2021 is going to be fine. we were in denial the whole way through. But one thing I discovered was like how much I missed live touring, how much I missed shows, how much I missed, just the thrill of it all. And I even, recognize like the least favorite part for me is the traveling. But I was like, man, even that doesn't seem so bad, if at the end of it we get to perform live. So for me to be able to perform my own songs off this record live is kind of the culmination, and ultimate, goal. So I do have some shows lined up in 2023. More shows incoming is the plan, for 2023, and to kind of, start getting this into live human ears, in real time. But in addition to that, I'm working hard on releasing a deluxe version of this record. There was a lot of songs and a lot of material and ideas that kind of ended up on the cutting room floor that I wanted to kind of, just breathe some life in. And so there's going to be some extended cuts of tracks. There's going to be, totally new songs that nobody has ever heard that will be included on this deluxe record. And then in addition to that, there's going to be a bunch of, music video content and just content that I'm pushing out on my socials as well for 2023. So there's a lot to look forward to.
Great. Now, you doing double duty? Are you opening and then coming back and playing in Sheila's band?
Oh, that's to be determined. We don't have any. That would be cool, but we don't have any plans for that just yet. But we'll see what the future holds. Never say never.
Yeah, I've seen that. Go well. It's like, hey, I'm gonna play a few songs. I'm gonna get stage warm, and then the rest of the band comes out. And Sheila's on stage, and it's this. There is a support act, but it's continuous. And obviously Prince didn't play in the time, but the time, or Vanity Six or somebody be playing before he got out there, and it was like this
Right.
seamless kind of transition through the night. But
Right.
yeah, no, I'd love to see that. Well, we will certainly check out the dates and be there. What is the best social media for people to follow you on?
So my name, MYCHAEL Gabriel, Michael with a Y, MYCHAEL Gabriel.com. I'm on all the social media platforms. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and that's my handle for all of them. Just my name, MYCHAEL Gabriel.
Well, we can't thank you enough. Our special guest has been MYCHAEL Gabriel. He is that writer, guitarist, performer, singer extraordinaire. Go out and see him. Pick up that record, Genesis. We look forward to following your progress and having a next chat soon. MYCHAEL, thank you so much for joining us.
Jay, thank you so much for having me.